Hi all, my name is Andrew Kitchell from Wheelhouse. I'm here to share a little bit about the current state of alternative accommodations. This is a project in collaboration with HSMAI. Excited to dive in with you all. First, a little bit about myself. As I mentioned, I'm Andrew. I'm the CEO and founder of Wheelhouse. Wheelhouse is a revenue management platform focused on alternative accommodations, or really the short-term rental space. Prior to this, I've also founded Beyond Pricing, another software, as well as Lyric Hospitality, an accommodations provider in the short-term rental space. So today we're going to cover a few topics. We're going to start with a category and inventory framing just to make sure we're speaking the same language when we say alternative accommodations. Secondly, we're going to focus in on revenue management and the challenges that this space presents. Third, we're going to talk about solutions and approaches to these challenges. And lastly, we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into how we solved one problem around revenue management, or how we think about one problem around revenue management. And that is, how do you think about a comp set in the alternative accommodation space? Part one, category and inventory framing. So firstly, we'd suggest that alternative accommodations are a massive and misunderstood category. It includes hosts and entrepreneurs, people who start with a single listing, find revenue in residence, and then build. And on the other side, you have the largest hospitality companies in the world now investing in the category. That includes folks like Marriott. It includes real estate companies. It includes private equity funds, etc. It's a wildly diverse category. We think the great trend that's going on could be called the great convergence. And that is that we see operators, whether they start with a small listing or have a larger portfolio to begin with, diversifying which assets they offer from a hospitality or accommodations perspective, right? So Marriott is playing in almost every single realm, but whether it's resorts, single family homes, multifamily hotels, or other, we would suggest that the great convergence is upon us, where people are looking for different types of hospitality experiences and operators are increasingly managing diverse portfolios. We also suggest that Airbnb will ultimately be known as a merchandising revolution, right? We like to say in our space, our customers are in the business of selling 24 photos. Not necessarily something you want to do with a small hotel room, but when you have a space like this, obviously each of your photos of your porch, pool, patio, Wi-Fi matter. And in fact, your porch, pool, patio, parking, pet policy, everything you think of can now be filtered by and therefore valued by a system like ours. Unfortunately, your pool is worth more in the summer. It's also worth more on the 4th of July or a holiday, at least in certain geographies, of course. Different days, different values to different travelers. So we like to think of the alternative accommodation space, or the short-term rental space, as a little bit of a revolution in merchandising. As a measure of this, it's not uncommon for people to look through 30 Airbnbs before booking, which means people are consuming somewhere around 300 to 500 photos before making a purchasing decision. That's an opportunity and a challenge. So let's discuss the challenges, many of which are probably obvious to you, around doing revenue management or pricing recommendations for this category. So first of all, in our space, we are trying to price highly unique assets. We like to say we're pricing teepees to 12 bedrooms. That's a huge challenge, right? Obviously, highly variable supply. The second challenge is that there's no true inventory categorization for our space. So yes, we certainly have reviews. 1 to 5-star reviews are the norm. However, you can have a 5-star couch and a 4-star castle. Therefore, it's not really a signal of quality of the space, maybe as so much as was the value there of the space. We don't have categorization. I think it's going to be a long time before any notion of categorization really emerges in our category. That is a challenge for pricing. The next part, inventory availability. So unlike in a hotel space where you kind of know if a new hotel is going to emerge, you know everyone's going to be available over the coming days. In the short-term rental space or the alternative accommodation space, inventory availability changes daily. Some people block their weeks. Some block their weekends. Some block holidays so that they and their families can visit their homes. New inventory can appear at any time, especially during large events when people might flood the market. This happens around the Super Bowl. So inventory availability is a wildly fluctuating thing tied to operational capabilities, regulation, owner preferences, etc. It means it's very complicated to predict how much inventory will actually be available. All this leads to very imperfect demand signals, right? Our challenge is trying to figure out for a unique asset, how should we look at booking patterns on other assets and potential availability to figure out how to price a unique asset on any given day? Non-trivial. And then in most cases, we're looking at pricing individual assets, right? We're looking at pricing a home. We have to predict binary outcomes. You're either going to book or not book. The cost of not booking is obviously $0 in revenue. If we sell you too early, we might not maximize the potential revenue for your spot. That's very different from when you have a portfolio of rooms in a hotel and you're able to leverage pacing to understand how you might want to adjust pricing strategy, right? In our space, once you're gone, you're gone. So we have to predict binary outcomes. In sum, to say the least, it is difficult to find the signal through the noise to be able to do precise pricing or perfect revenue management in the category. So what approaches and solutions have emerged? The first, it starts with fundamentally new statistical approaches. If you were to take a hotel revenue management model and slap it onto our category, we've tried, it will not work. So fundamentally new statistical approaches are required to predict binary outcomes, as well as do a bunch of other math to solve this challenging problem of how to price unique assets. One thing our category is very strong at is attribute-based pricing, right? For 8.5 years, we've been looking at the problem of how do you figure out what a porch, pool, patio, Wi-Fi, parking, pet policy, all of this stuff is worth. It's hard, and you need to run a lot of tests, a lot of back testing to be able to figure out how to price this inventory perfectly. But our space is strong in attribute-based pricing. We also have gotten very good at interpreting similar booking signals or booking signals at similar nearby properties into understanding how to price your home, right? If a 2-bedroom near you is booked, if you have another 2-bedroom, should we adjust your pricing or not? It depends a little bit how competitive you are with that property. In our space, bedroom count doesn't necessarily connote true competitors. Interesting, but true. We've also had to think about novel comp set logic. So how do we identify competitors on a given day for a particular property? This is also a challenge. As a benefit is forced transparency into our category. So Wheelhouse, for example, we publish all of our research. We don't want to hide anything from our customers because we know they all take our information and modify it to fit a unique revenue management strategy. Forced transparency is good. I haven't seen it much in the hotel space. In our space, Wheelhouse has led the way, first published and transparent pricing engines. And lastly, we've had to develop novel ways to price supply. That means we offer rule-based pricing or data-driven pricing. Collectively, we call it a hybrid pricing approach, but we allow operators to turn up or down the data dial depending on how much they think they want to apply data to either various nights, various listings in their portfolio, or any other strategic consideration that they want. Lastly, most recently, we've seen professional revenue management shops emerging in our category. These are sometimes folks out of the hotel space who are coming and building businesses to help operators run their portfolios better. Of course, there are also operators from the short-term rental and vacation rental space who have built large portfolios of managed supply as well. But this is yet another signal that both the technology and the operational layers are rapidly evolving in the alternative accommodation space. Now, let's do a deeper dive into just one interesting problem in our category, figuring out a true competitive set. To restate the challenges in our category, when you're looking at a comp set, it's hard because new listings can appear daily. Some listings can appear for certain times of the year, and maybe you only compete with certain properties in the summer, those with a pool, or the winter, those near a ski slope. There is no categorization, and there are limited quality indicators that are predictable or actually leverageable in a consistent fashion in our space. It's also hard because we're just starting to understand consumer preferences, which rapidly shift. Most recently, during COVID, we saw extended stays really proliferate in the category. That was a massive shift. All of a sudden, your pet policy became very important because people staying for longer periods of time travel with pets. So all these consumer patterns, they rapidly change. And it's interesting to try to figure out how to adapt to these consumer preferences, at least from a pricing or operations perspective. And the other thing we're seeing more and more of is cross-market or out-of-market competitors. Now, this might be obvious for people on islands where travelers might be relatively agnostic to which island they travel to, but increasingly on Airbnb, people are searching around an experience they want to have. It could be a natural experience, it could be kind of an artistic or cultural experience, and they're looking at categories and then selecting location afterwards, right? We're no longer just traveling to a destination and finding the best place. It's kind of flipped on its head. So what do we know about comp sets in the short-term rental space? One is that proximity does matter, no surprise, even though we are seeing multi-market listings emerge. Two is that similarity does matter, but maybe not as much as you might think. It's not uncommon to see a 2-bedroom competing against a 4-bedroom, right? A 4-bedroom can work well for 4 single travelers. A 2-bedroom can work well for a family traveling with children, right? So similarity matters, but not as much in hotel space, and similarity extends across attributes. Again, your porch or pool might make you competitive with just people who offer that same amenity, depending on the season. But what really matters is booking performance. And this is what allows a team like us to recommend a comp set based on each week. We want to know who's booking similar to you at each season to figure out who are you truly competing against in that moment. A non-trivial challenge. How do we solve this? In the short-term rental space, we have much broader comp sets. It's not unusual for customers to look at 50 plus properties to define a competitive set. Secondly, we update recommended comp sets frequently. Every single week, we're looking at who's booking at similar ways that your home usually books, and therefore trying to derive signal from those properties. In our space, also, it's not unusual to have multiple comp sets. You might have a luxury comp set. If you're a property manager, you might just be competing against the other property manager in town. You might just be competing against people on the beach. It might not be the right way to do it, but it is a rational way to price your home. And as I mentioned, the most important thing that our space has to do is to leverage booking patterns to consistently update who's in your competitive set. So what conclusions can we draw from all of this on the state of the alternative accommodation space in 2023? First, I'd suggest that the alternative accommodation space is a really poor name for one of the most interesting transitions in the history of accommodations. It is massive and widely misunderstood, and includes, again, the hosts and entrepreneurs, all the way up to the most sophisticated hotel operators in the world, all coming into the category. Part 2, the great convergence is upon us. We would suggest this is why hotels and the alternative accommodation space need to drive more dialogue about what's working, because our customers are working across categories. And lastly, our category has required and will continue to require new and novel approaches to revenue management and pricing. Luckily, you can see it and read it in the research today, kind of how our category is approaching this, but there's a lot more to share, and hopefully in the future, we'll be able to do a deeper dive with you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Have a great day.